Hello, my friends. Thank you so much for joining the Gunn Show. Yes, for those of you who are first timers, if you've tuned into the Gunn Show today, firstly, it's a privilege to have both video and audio if you're watching the video version of this. But if you're on Spotify, Apple, Google, those places, it's going to be audio alone, and I have a great guest. But for those of you who have joined us for the first time and you've decided to tune in based on the name of the show, which we notice has two N's, and not one. If you've tuned in solely to talk about guns, the weapons, I don't have any of those. And if you're solely tuned in to talk about guns, the muscles, as you can see, I don't have any of those either. We are actually here bringing awareness to manufacturing as a whole. We're humanizing an industry that everyone who's been on this podcast, including my incredible guest today, really value. We realize how it stabilizes households, it stabilizes economies. It's a stabilizer that allows people to have success, and we're bringing an awareness to an industry that is still thought of as dirty, dull, grungy, gritty. Maybe we're in the industry because, we couldn't hack it at a university and, whatever. We are changing these misconceptions purposely because I want you all, especially those of you who aren't in manufacturing, either watching or listening right now, to just take a moment and look around you. Look around you and see what is there, what's been made. I bet, other than the air, the people, and maybe some nature, if you're sitting in nature right now listening to this podcast, has been made in manufacturing. What do the doctors have without manufacturing? The dentists, what's going on around the world? All you TikTok, we call it screenagers at this point, but all you TikTok folks out there, Instagram folks, we're making the satellites. We designed all of these phones and created these phones, the cars, the planes. I know for those of you who are returning to the Gunn Show podcast, this is the same spiel, but it's an important spiel. So thank you for tuning in. Again, without any further ado, I'm going to bring and introduce my guest. His name is Jim. Jim owns a very cool and unique machine shop, but it didn't start with 20 machines or 15 machines or 30 machines and this vast understanding of how manufacturing works. This young man has a story, and not just one story, but lots of stories, and music stories, and welding stories, and so much information. In fact, I was filming at JLP today, and I was just having a regular conversation filming with Kitamura and the success that Jim's had with Kitamura, and I said, my friend, brother, we got to get you on a podcast today because what's inside that head the audience would love to hear more about. So for now, I am done talking. Jim, thank you so much for joining me on the Gunn Show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I would love to just learn more about you. And although I've spent the day with you today, I want the audience to know more about you. So I when I was coming to your shop, thought I was in a residential neighborhood. And there's many reasons for that. But tell us how you grew up, the mindset, the creativity that you had. You've talked to me about triangles and squares, and there was a certain term that it was deemed as, and you thought this was normal for everyone, right? But you really have a unique background that I'd love to hear more about. This is the Gunn Show.
Well, it started with farming, actually. I grew up, and this whole area was a farm, and I think a lot comes from farming, believe it or not. A lot of ingenuity, a lot of problem solving. So that was kind of the very beginning of it for me. But then, as time went on, my father was into drag racing. And he did that. He had a partner, and they'd been doing that their whole life. And it wasn't something that was funded properly, I'll say. So, I kind of grew up watching them take all their blown-up engine parts to the welder and giving them half of their money and talking about the guy like he walked on water or whatever. And then the next thing, when he was done, they'd take it over to the machinist, and they would hire him to machine whatever the previous guy welded, and he also got the other half of their money and was also looked at like he walked on water. So early on, I saw how needed and how important that those fields are, and it kind of maybe was the spark that started the fire, you know. Then I can't really put an exact time on when the passion for manufacturing really started to get going, but it was in probably my earlier teenage years where I really got interested in welding, and especially TIG welding and stuff.
Well, Jim, you mentioned welding, and I think a lot of us have seen that area of let's say trades, right? And that there's actually a 400,000 person gap in welding alone right now.
I'm sure there
so,
is.
So, A, let's get more people into it, but B, what inspired you? What is it? Was it just that you saw your parents giving away money to this part of the industry, and you're like, I can make money there?
Yeah. It was that, and also, just being able to create something, and to being able to take two pieces of metal and join them together, just for that reason alone makes it interesting to me. But, there's all kinds of materials, and there's all kinds of welding process that, it's a fascinating world for someone like me that's interested in manufacturing. But it definitely got me interested, was watching, I'll say, like an aluminum cylinder head being repaired was kind of a big thing to it. It really got me going on it.
Yeah, I like that. And we're going to jump into the expansion of welding into your machine shop that you have,
Yeah.
JLP Machine and Welding. We'll talk about that a bit. But before we do, there's so many incredible stories that you have. I'd like to talk a little bit about your racing history and how that evolved over time and what you did with it and the break you took even to go along with it. And in fact, I think you have a 14-year-old son who's getting into it as well.
Yeah,
So let's talk
he's
about
been
all of
doing
that.
it. Yeah, well, we started, I grew up in drag racing, and then I had an opportunity to go work for another guy who had a bit more of an operation, and that was in something called a funny car. And then after I worked for him for about a year, I was probably 16, 17 years old at this point, I ended up having an opportunity to drive the car. And so I did, and found that I really liked doing it, and it was really one of the most impressive things impressive to me that I've done myself, was to feel the amount of power that is involved with those cars and the amount of acceleration. And so I did that for a while, and I thought that was where my path was going to take me. And I had already been welding, I'd been doing machine work, I'd been fabricating pieces for the car, and just the thing about racing is almost everybody involved with it knows a little bit about machining, they know a little bit about welding. So if you don't put out really good-looking machine work and really good-looking welding, then everybody's going to call you right out on it. So I think that was the beginning of where what set the bar was racing, set the bar high, so that because everybody knew what they were looking at, even if they could do it or couldn't do it. So that alone kind of, I had been doing that. I'd been driving the car, working on the car, not making a lot of money. I came out with some products that for racing, one was an oil pan. It was an aluminum oil pan that had to have a rail. The rail was machined and then sheet metal welded onto it to make the pan. And I sold a few of those, but it really wasn't going anywhere. And, that took me into, I basically did that for a while. Then I got to a point where if I want to be able to go racing and do it right, I'm going to have to be able to do it on my own money. And at the time where I was in my life, I decided, you know what, I'm going to hang it up for now, and I'm going to focus on building my business. Because if I don't start now, which was at the time in my early 20s, if I didn't get started on building my business, I was never going to have the money that I wanted to have to do the things I want to do, including racing. So, that's kind of where I stopped racing in probably 2000, and I think it was 2004 I was officially done. But our last real big season was '01, I think. So.
Well, then I got to ask you, you said last real big season, because my follow-up question was going to be, do you have any extreme moments or favorite success stories or anything you could share with the audience?
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh.
I mean, we did really good. We qualified in the top half of the field all the time at the races we went to. You know, I've been on fire before and survived that in a funny car, which is pretty hectic. But I got through that, and then also just a lot of success, a lot of camaraderie comes out of racing. We won a lot of rounds. I can't really say that I have a championship yet, but at some point I would like to be able to say I won a championship in whatever class we're racing in. But I kind of never got to it, so it's unfinished business. But I knew back then if I was going to do it, I would need a lot of money too. So it kind of fueled my desire for this business. And then that, of course, turned into something else entirely, which was supporting my family and living the way we want to live, you know. So
yeah.
It took about 20 years, I'd say. I'd say right around '02, I really started pushing the business and started backing away from racing. And then here we are in 2023, and I'm back at it again. And now I have a son who is also, we're into junior drag. So that's actually what kind of led me back into drag racing. Was I was looking for something to do with him. And I said, well, we'll do a junior dragster. And we started that whole process. And he's found that he really loved it. And then what was really even more amazing on top of that was immediately I saw the need for a component on those cars that no one had made yet, which was a disconnect to basically disconnect the engine from the wheels without having to take this belt off of the pulleys. So by doing that, you can basically just press a button and the car is in neutral. So that was like the perfect opportunity for me to pull my son into the business, because now he sees the whole side of it. He saw the engineering, he saw the prototype, the testing. Now we're selling them to everybody around the country. And I believe it's gonna kind of be one of those things that changes the class somewhat. But it's good to have him involved in that. And that I think is fueling the passion for manufacturing to him, which hopefully he's gonna wanna come in and be involved in the business, as with all my children, you know.
When was the last time you thought about work holding? How long did it take you to change over the clamping devices on your CNC machines? Days? Maybe hours? Don't let work holding be an afterthought. With the Heimbuch system, changeovers can be done in seconds without readjustment of the runout. No longer do you have to turn down jobs because you don't have the right work holding. When flexibility is critical, add a mandrel, 2 or 3 jaw adaptation onto your collet chuck. Use it on your turning and milling machines. With such a low maintenance system, you will see less machine downtime and your profits will soar. To learn more about the Heimbuch system, visit www.heimbuchamerica.com or call 414-358-9550.
I think he will be. And that's a really great way to help someone fully understand how manufacturing works, is to see the building of it, see the construction, the design, and then the implementation of how it functions, right? And that's absolutely brilliant. If we could do that to everyone in the world, we wouldn't have a labor shortage right now, and that'd be fantastic.
Oh, right. I mean, the one thing I've learned in this life is that hard work, as long as you're prepared to work harder than everybody else, you will not have a problem getting what you want out of life. You just have to be willing to put the effort in. And if that means that putting that effort in is going into learning how to do something or crafting your skill, then put the effort in it. You know, put relentless amount of time. You have to think it while you're sleeping. You know, you have to eat it. You have to be. You really got to work hard to learn how to be good at something. You know, It's very important to spend the time. Nothing comes easy. It's all the good old sayings that are already, everybody's always heard forever. There's no easy way to do any of this stuff. And if it looks easy, that's because the people that you watch and do it are so good at it that they make it look that way. And that's all common knowledge. I mean, I'm not, but I believe that, and I've experienced that. I've worked. Anybody asks me, how do you get here? Hard work. That's all. That's my number one answer, is hard work. Whether it's learning, whether it's producing, whatever it is, it doesn't matter.
Powerful statement. There's about 5 different segues I could take this to. The first
I know. We could go on all day about it. We could go into so many things.
There's something I'd like to bring up, and although I wasn't going to immediately bring it up now, I think now's a good time in the sense that you mentioned hard work.
Yeah.
And especially here in the U.S., that's kind of the American dream, and we believe if we work hard that we will produce something, right? And the harder you work, the more you produce. That's kind of how this country was established.
Absolutely.
For the most part, right?
Yeah.
And you're great proof of that. Now, a lot of times hard work comes with a sacrifice of something else. And a lot of times that something else can be family, or it can be free time. And I'm sitting in your factory right now recording a podcast with you that is right beside your own house, and your kids can stop by any time. So we must also say that with creativity, a lot can be done in combination with that hard work. And there's a lot that went behind that thought process for you too, wasn't there?
Yes, there was. For one thing is, by the driving alone, right? Not having to drive. And I recognize that not everybody has this ability, but the closer you can be to where you work, the less wasted time you're going to have, and that's time that you can be productive. And if you're in a situation where you can't be like that, my suggestion would be to make sure while you're driving to be working things out in your mind. You can be thinking about stuff. You can be, try to turn that time into something you can get something back from. You know what I mean? But
there's a good chance, Jim, that someone is utilizing their time while driving, listening to this podcast right now, thinking about what you just said. I bet there are hundreds of people going full circle with that conversation.
Right.
Sacrifices, again, I want to bring up because hard work. And this is kind of a fun segue as well because it's the music segue.
Yeah.
For everyone listening and or watching, my buddy Jim has one hell of a singing voice. I got to listen to some of his songs today, and we're talking, I'm no music critic. That's not my job. It wouldn't pay the bills if I tried to be, I don't think. But I personally think it's as good as anything I've ever heard on the radio. But, Jim, you also had to make a choice when it came to the manufacturing business and the real high level of singing opportunity that you had.
Yes, I did. I had some, I'd sidelined to the racing, sidelined to everything. Music kind of ran in my family. So early on, I was singing. My voice is my instrument, but I also play guitar and stuff. But that's kind of been in the background my whole life. So it was really something that during the time I was building my business, I would be able to do, the music wouldn't take me away like racing would. The music didn't cost as much money as racing would have. So it was kind of a nice little hobby that I started doing with where we had a band and I was writing songs and stuff. But we ended up recording an album in Nashville professionally, and went through all the motions, and I was exposed to a lot of really good high-level people, and it was the same story from all of them. It was, you have something here, it could be used, and you could hone this into something that would be sellable. Your product is sellable, and the question you have to ask yourself is, are you willing to give up everything you're doing now to go chase something that may or may not happen? And on top of that, even if it does happen, how lucrative is it going to really be compared to what you're doing now in the manufacturing world? And it just goes to show you that manufacturing always wins. I mean, that's the most stable and the best way to create wealth, So I think the choice was clear for me because aside from music, manufacturing was as big or more of a passion for me. So, I just kind of let it fizzle away. But it was definitely a good time that we spent doing it, and we had a lot of great success. We opened up for a lot of big names and had a lot of fun with the band, and everybody was I had a great group of guys, and we did everything. We did enough for me to be satisfied with what we did with it, and hopefully, the music's out there. It'll live on.
Well, manufacturing always wins is one heck of a statement, and you are a rock star in my
man.
book. For sure. And you haven't fully given up. If you walk out on the shop floor right now, you got a microphone and a setup to sing karaoke
I do,
anytime you want.
Right.
So it's still in your blood, and you are for sure a rock star. So I'd like to now kind of dive into the company itself. You have your shirt on. For those who are watching, you can see JLP, Machine and Welding, has been an evolution. And we've talked about the fact that it's near to your home so your kids can come see you anytime, even if you're working late. You started with the fact of welding, and you saw profit in welding, and you still do welding to this day.
Yeah.
And, in fact, we're sitting in front of a machine, which we will talk about because you gave me a few key notes about the overall position of how you feel welding supports your business, right?
Yep.
So we're going to talk about that some as well. But let's first just give a bird's eye view or elevator pitch or whatever you want to call it of the company you've created and what you currently make, so the people watching or listening right now go, well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Let's hear some more.
Well, right now we currently make medical implants, mostly in the form of bone plates, which are typically complex surfaces. There isn't a square or straight edge on any part of the whole part, and it needs to be made to very, very exact tolerances. And a lot of people might say that, a bone plate, well, what difference does it make? It's just being attached to a bone. And I try to combat that by saying, well, the reason why everything is toleranced so tightly is so that the test data is accurate. So if you develop a product that's tightly toleranced, you can pretty much guess how that product is going to perform all the time. Whereas if it was not as exacting as it is, you could test a product one way and then it would fail another way just because the tolerances were so wide open. So that's why in the medical world, people might say things are over-toleranced, but they're toleranced so that it's repeatable test results, and they know that part is not going to fail when it's in somebody's body, which is, that's how I look at it. And that's why it's important to, to be able to machine all those products. So within that comes a lot of really difficult setups, a lot of difficult parts. Most of everything we do is either 4 or 5 axis machining. A lot of simultaneous 5-axis machining takes place here. A lot of simultaneous 4-axis machining. And every part has a considerable amount of surfacing on it, which is also demands performance out of the machinery. So I'm always looking, when I buy a machine, I'm always keeping that all in mind, because we need to be able to manufacture those parts like that. So it's tight tolerance, very complex components is where I started the business, and not where I started it, but where I ended up, because I ended up getting most of the work that nobody else wanted to do. And when I kind of tapped into that market, I found that there was as much of a market as you want there to be for that level of manufacturing. I mean, if you're just manufacturing, brackets and, nothing that's really anything more than any other shop can do, well, then you're competing with every other shop. Whereas with what we do, there's only maybe a handful of shops in the country that can manufacture this stuff. And I kind of coined a phrase a long time ago when it comes to machining that has always produced success, and that is, the path of most resistance is the one thou shalt taketh. And what I mean by that is, I mean that okay, we're looking at a part. Now, if I spend the time to properly make a fixture, and I spend a week and a half to make a fixture or 2 weeks to build this system for a production part, or I can spend 2 days, and after the 2 days, I am still uncertain of whether it's even going to work. Well, if you go for the harder or the more difficult approach and the more lengthy approach into the fixturing, at the end of that, it's almost guaranteed to work, and it's always going to be better. So the moral of that whole story is that if you put the time in up front, you'll get it back on the back end, which we prove over and over again down there when we manufacture these elaborate fixturings and elaborate, production tombstones full of all these different operations. And yeah, I could have got the first part off a lot quicker, but because I spent the time to engineer all the fixturing and be a lot more elaborate with it, now the money just rolls in from that job instead of it being, something that the operator is constantly fighting with. So that's kind of the approach, is to take the time and do it right, and then reap the reward in the end, just like everything else. Work real hard at it. There's no easy way. If there was, everybody would do it, so.
If there was, everybody would do it. And Jim, I like that you said maybe it takes me a little longer to get the first part off. And immediately in my head, I was like, well, I bet you got the last part off a whole lot quicker
Yes,
than somebody
yeah.
who got that first part off.
Exactly.
Based on that fixturing, right?
Take the time and put it in not just the fixturing, but into the programming too. Remove all the unnecessary moves out of the program. Make the machines run efficiently. Don't waste motion. Wasted motion, and this comes from somebody who owns their own machine tools. Don't wear the machine out doing anything but cutting parts or traveling back to the tool changer. You see so much wasted motion in programs, or there's the post, nobody ever gets their post from the software exactly correct, and there's always all kinds of wasted time and wasted motion in the machining process alone. Sometimes I go in and edit the code because I can't get the cam to spit out what I want. So I'll go in and edit the code to make the machine more efficient at what it's going to do.
That is a lost art. Might I just
yeah.
throw that in there? And a lot of people is being able to go through the code and read it.
And you should be able to. Anybody programming a CNC machine, it shouldn't just be post and then go. You should at least understand, because then when you run into some sort of problem, you can solve it. You can just look at the code and say, oh, here's what's going on, instead of, well, I don't know, we got to call, something's wrong with the code, we got to call the cam company. Well, I get along very good with my cam company, but I can tell you those people are very busy, and the likelihood of them, I can't tell you how many times I've walked into big companies and machines have been down for reasons in my mind that are inconceivable. So it's just a matter of understanding what's going on, and if you don't, put the time into learning it. There's no harm in learning, and repetition is the mother of learning. You have to be prepared to just invest your brain into everything you're going to do, and then there'll be nothing you can't handle and nothing you can't solve. And if you can't solve it, you'll know how to find out how to. Those are the types of, that's like kind of my philosophy.
It's a good philosophy, and I'm going to kind of play off of that as well. And I don't know if you're a social media guy at all, but I'll scroll through, say, an Instagram or something like that.
Yeah.
And, it's mainly videos and pictures, right? It's not a whole lot of what we're doing right now. It's
Right.
not built for that. How many times have you seen a video of a program and you question, well, why is it going up 3 inches and then back to the beginning and then going down 3 inches? And why are the rapids in these places? Why aren't you... There's so many areas and videos that I've seen, probably much like yourself, the way you've described going into the system and making the modifications.
Yeah.
And I personally learned line by line as well. So I think I've probably lost it over the past decade or so, but in my first 12 years as a machinist,
Yeah.
I learned line by line on a floppy drive, and I knew how to read every code, and I could edit the entire thing, and that was, for jewelry industry and woodworking.
So you know the importance of it.
Very much, yes, very much, and I agree with you. But I want to kind of blow the audience's mind real quick, because for people who don't know you, Jim, and I'm getting to know you better and better with the minute, and I'm grateful that you're offering this time to me. Did you go to four-year university, get your engineering degree? Did you go to trade school? How did this all work? I'm obviously setting you up because I know the answer, but it's meant to inspire the people listening right now.
I did not. When I got out of high school, and graduated, and then I decided that I wanted, instead of going to college, I was going to finance a CNC machine, and I bought a Prototrack mill to manufacture my components for racing that I wanted to do, and I had a Bridgeport, an old 1940s, got it for nothing type of thing that I learned on, and I had a rotary table, and then got interested immediately into CNC when I wanted to cut an arc or something. And then, it was just in high school, it was funny because my mother had reminded me not too long ago that when I was in high school and I took some aptitude testing, that spatial relations, I tested for spatial relations, and they actually called my mother at the time to tell her that it was off the charts. And that had nothing to do with me ending up in machining, which is exactly spatial relations. So it's kind of funny how, there's like another route or another flow that happens with people and what they're good at and where they end up, and I'm not sick of it yet. So
Modig Machine Tool was founded in 1947 in Sweden with a focus on building best-in-class machines. The family-owned company develops, engineers, and produces premium machines for high-performance machining in leading industries including aerospace, automotive, energy, and construction equipment. The Modig machine series are all designed and built with high-quality rigidity, high dynamic stability, and precision technology modules. The common denominators that give Modig machines the flexibility, adaptability, and versatility known as the Modig differentiators. Learn more with www.modig.se. That is www.modig.se.
And for everyone watching in summary or listening in summary, this man is self-taught, but you can hear all the creativity, creating his own tombstone, work holding, editing the programs, how important programming is, how important that last piece is, all the setup. I mean, this is self-taught. So the reason I bring that up, and the reason I'm talking more than I probably should right now, because this is all about Jim today, is just because I want the people listening and watching right now to just be inspired, feel confidence in yourself that if you want to do something, you can.
Yeah,
you most certainly can. You don't have to, if you want to, and I never want to bring down universities because there's definitely education that has value as well. So I don't ever bring down or talk bad about, but if university is not for you, you don't have to stress that you won't have a successful life. Even if trade school is not for you, this guy right here, this young man right here, self-taught, has created an incredibly successful machining shop. And I kind of remember the part where he said, well, I liked working on cars, I liked figuring things out, and I liked being creative. So that's the reason I brought that up. I hope that has been helpful for all of you. Now, I want to go and talk about a couple of specific points that I think a large part of our audience will enjoy. One thing is what we're sitting in front of right now, and then when we're done talking about that, I want to talk about your electricity system that you have in your facility as well, because you may or may not be the reincarnated form of Nikola Tesla.
No,
so
definitely not.
I'm going to take this opportunity for the audience and myself to learn more about that as well. So starting with what we have sitting here, this has really brought joy to your life and some great success to your life as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, once I got into the medical world, I found and became aware of a process called laser welding. And as a TIG welder, I welded a lot of stainless, a lot of chromoly, a lot of aluminum. But, when it got down to micro level stuff or smaller components that need a much more focused, much less power weld, I got kind of turned on to laser welding. So immediately within the industry at the time, I was doing a lot of prototype work for a medical company that had a lot of components that needed laser welding. And I remember actually being in their shop when working with an engineer on a component, and he was trying to make, they needed it for something that they had to be doing immediately. And, it was going to go on a plane, and they were flying to some convention, and they had to show off the instrument. And I made all the components, and then we went there into their shop while the guy that worked there laser welded the parts for us. And I looked at that and said, that's my next machine. So immediately I went out. As a matter of fact, this is a good little story as well about that. I remember getting a job from another customer that had components, and I said, oh, do you want those laser welded? And they said, oh, can you do laser welding? I said, yes, absolutely. And I didn't even have the machine at that point. But what I did have was the will to buy one. So I started looking around at the machines. I found a company right in Rhode Island, Laser Star, and I went down. I told them I was interested in a laser welder. I went down. I looked at it. I said, okay, but here's what I need you to do. I need you to weld these parts for me with the same machine I'm going to buy. And as part of the deal, they actually welded the 25 pieces I needed welded, and then I delivered them to the customer, and within the next week I had the laser welder and got trained on how to use it. And having a welding background, it was easy to, the laser was a joy to learn how to use. And immediately got into that and got the machine and started getting more and more work. And, one engineer from one company goes to another engineer from another company, and it just keeps growing to the point where, laser welding became a decent size of the business. And, so it's kind of a nice, the two complement each other. A lot of the components we manufacture have to be welded together, so like surgical tools and stuff like that. So it really worked out. This is our newest laser welder right here. This is a open platform, which actually I built myself using everything I'd learned about laser welding and what I actually wanted to have improved upon the actual out-of-the-box machine, which is what you see here. And I made a lot of the components. I also utilized the aluminum extrusion company that seems to make every single thing you could ever imagine. What a wonderful company that is. But I machined the components for the table and stuff, and this is our newest machine right here. And our first laser welder is still in service and still operating and doing jobs regularly. Yeah. So
I know there's probably a large portion of the audience listening right now and not able to watch. If you want to watch, you're welcome to find that on MTDCNC.com. But what I like when every time I bring up welding with my buddy Jim here, he lights up. He really does enjoy it. He loves talking about it. He loves spending time doing it. It's been a passion for such a long time. So if you're not watching, just know that when you hear Jim start to get excited in his voice, his face is lighting up at the same time as well. It's just a passion. So something else when I was walking around this machine shop, Jim, is, and you pointed it out to me because I don't think I would have known. In fact, having a conversation about electricity is the depth that I probably can't handle. Let me be fair. And I'm a great swimmer, and I can go to the deep end a lot. Yeah. But jumping into the deep end of this pool, I get lost. But I do think it's super fair to sometimes, for myself, place myself in situations where I don't know all the answers already, or I don't even know the questions to ask to find the answers, and just leave it wide open. And electricity, I think, is one of those. But talking with you and learning from you, I do find what you have explained to me in far better words than I could ever give. I do find it to be incredibly valuable for a large portion of the audience, and I think it's worth bringing up. And although we've made a video about this, I think it's worth bringing up as often as possible because I've been in the machine shops, you've been in the machine shops. When you hit that go on the spindle and it's torquing up and it's, maybe another line goes down. Electricity is a problem in many shops because they're always fighting for, well, if I add one more machine, I got to add this, or
Yeah.
I can't add one more machine because of my electrical issues,
Right.
or I can't add a certain size machine because of electrical issues.
Oh,
So
yeah.
all of these shops are coming across us. So I hope I've built up the platform for you to explain how you have really creatively adapted your shop to a unique, maybe it's not as unique, but you first called this guy when he
Yeah.
was working out of his garage,
Right.
right? Out of his basement. So
Yeah.
maybe people are still learning about this, and I think it's worth explaining to the audience right now, if you wouldn't mind. And imagine that the majority are listening and not watching. So try and be as vivid as you can
Sure.
with helping people understand the technology and where they could maybe find it for their shops.
Well, what happened was when I had the opportunity to build my shop on the property that's out behind my house, there were some stipulations. One was there was no three-phase power on the street. And the other stipulations with the town where, obviously we're not open to the public. There's no sign out front. Product can't be seen from the street. So all of that criteria kind of lined up so that we're able to do this here, because you can't say, I understand that most people can't have 30 CNC machines in their backyard and a welding operation and a medical manufacturing house right out behind their house, but I can tell you it makes it really easy to run machines all night unattended because I can just walk down here and make sure everything's okay. So that was attractive to me. But getting to the power situation was that without three-phase in the machine tool world, you basically can't do anything, because if it isn't a highly controlled electric motor, it's a three-phase induction motor running so many other things that are involved with all these processes, like the air compressor, for instance. So without three-phase, that was the first real big challenge, and I knew that I would never be able to get to the level I wanted to get to with what they call rotary phase converters. Rotary phase converters are, inefficient, extremely inefficient for so many reasons. They work, but they're not practical. Not when you get to the point where you have more than one or two machines. So I began searching right away after having a small CNC machine. I had a Prototrack mill, and I had a big Yamazaki engine lathe, and I had all manual equipment when I first started, and a loud rotary phase converter that could barely turn on the most powerful spindle. And it was the type of thing where you couldn't run this if you were going to run that, and blah, blah, blah. So I searched and searched, and I found this thing online back in probably the early 2000s called Phase Perfect, which was this company that made something called a digital phase converter. And I thought to myself, well, what could that be? So I called them up and said, this is what I'm doing. I got these CNC machines. I want to add another machine, and I just built a new building, and I want to power up, a three-phase service with something that's going to create three-phase from single-phase. And I ended up talking to this guy that owned that company, the guy that pioneered the technology and had the patent on it, and had a great conversation about electricity with him. And that was another thing that kind of sparked my interest in electricity, was having to hook all these machines up and wanting to understand how it all works. And from then, to this day, I'm still studying electricity. I love it. If I wasn't in manufacturing, I would definitely be involved in some sort of electrical something, But once I got the first digital phase converter, I remember saving up all my money to buy it. I think it was like $3,000. But it was this little one. I have it to this day. It runs my CNC bandsaw now. But it was the first one. It was the smallest one they made. I put that in service, and it ran all of the equipment I was running on the rotary converter without a problem, with no stipulation of, you can run this one or that one, whatever. You can run them all at once, turn them on all at once. You can do whatever you want. And then I started adding machines, and once I had enough guts to buy my first real machining center, which the payment terrified me, by the way, but that goes away quickly once you start producing. I added a machine and it ran that same phase converter, and then I added another one and it ran that. These are full up 20 horsepower machining centers, and I was shocked, like, well, how many machines am I going to be able to add to this little thing? And, you have to be smart. You can't create a situation where you can have a fire. You can't create a situation where you have unprotected wires, obviously. And I didn't. Everything was wired properly. Everything was correct. And we got to, the third big machining center, and the littlest perfect phase converter finally alarmed out and said, I can't handle this.
Wow.
And so then I bought the much bigger one that they have.
Now you had the money to invest in the bigger one, yes.
So I invested in the bigger one, and I put the smaller one onto something else, and then as time went on, we started adding machines. I forget how many we ended up with on that machine, on that big one, but it was a significant amount of them. And then now we have 3 of their large phase converters that all run. I think there's about 25 machines hooked up on the 3 phase converters, which is amazing when you consider what they're doing and how well they run. And there's all kinds of little bonuses you get with it. Like, for instance, on the electric side, say most 3-phase services are 208 volts. Well, a single-phase service is 240 volts. The beauty of the perfect phase converter is that whatever your input voltage is, that's the voltage of the 3-phase. So I have 240 volt 3-phase here. And that little bit more voltage I call as a bonus. Everything runs better. Everything's a little bit, it spools up faster. It doesn't draw as much amperage because the voltage is higher. So everything runs a little bit better. Some machines are a little sensitive to 240, so we just put them on a buck boost transformer and knock it down to 220 or exactly where it needs to be so that they'll function. But we're always at the upper edge of the voltage, which is good for multiple loads, and I believe it's a good thing to have in a shop. 480 volts is even better, but that's another whole different set of circumstances. The bottom line is that the perfect phase converters have enabled me to have this business here, and enabled me to run this company as if we had a 3-phase service, or even better, with a single-phase service, which has multiple benefits, including the whole thing with the electric bill. Because I'm not buying a commercial 3-phase electric service. I'm buying a residential electric service or a commercial single-phase service, which means they can't charge me the same amount of money. And that alone has made it well worth the working with Phase Perfect. But on top of that, I would say that everything runs better because of it. So if you gave me the option right now of having a utility 3-phase service or the service that I have right now that we create, I would take this service every time. That's how reliable and happy I am with that product. And what it does inside, it actually creates perfect 3-phase. It's not like just a VFD where you only get the top half of the sine wave. You're getting an actual 3-phase sine wave out of those machines, which means the switching that is happening inside them is just phenomenal to think about. The speed and the accuracy, and the being able to maintain that accuracy under any load, which is, to me, one of the most impressive things the more I learn about electricity.
GTI Spindle Technology is North America's largest and most experienced independent spindle repair providers. They achieve or exceed OEM quality and testing standards while still delivering exceptional one-on-one personalized customer service and support. Since inception in 1997, they strive to provide excellence in root cause of failure analysis and reporting and cost reduction programs with partnering with the clients to implement best-in-class predictive maintenance and vibration analysis programs for their spindles and machine tools. With multiple U.S. service centers, they are poised to support manufacturing locations throughout North America. In the event that you have new spindle applications or replacement spindle needs, they offer a full line of new Purion speed spindles to suit any component manufacturing needs that you may have. Please visit www.gtispindle.com to learn more, or call anytime at 888-473-9675 to discuss how they can assist you.
Thank you for sharing that with us. That's like I told the audience, I'm sitting with a guy that's a lot smarter than me, and that's actually how I like to surround people in my life anyway, is surround myself with people who are going to teach me something.
I just try to pay attention, you know.
I try to pay attention as well.
Yeah.
That is for sure. So this pretty much comes to the conclusion of our podcast, but oftentimes, and I didn't warn you about this, but oftentimes we like to play a couple of games at the end just to have a fun moment before we close out. And one game is called Two Truths and a Lie, so if you're willing to play it, I tell you two truths and a lie, and you see if which one's the lie, and then vice versa. You tell me two truths and a lie, and I try to guess which one of those is the lie. And then I'll ask you one random question that just we get to know a little bit more about who you are as a person.
Sure.
And I have that question in my head already.
All right.
But if you're willing to play those two.
Yeah, of course, I'm willing.
All right, so I'll ask the question first because that might give you a little time to think about your two truths and a lie. But the question is, and this is a question I ask a lot because I think it's one of the more popular questions that allow us to understand the reasons. You know what? I'll just ask a question and we'll find out. How about that? If you could have a cup of tea, cup of coffee with any person, alive or dead, that's ever existed, and you had an hour, 2 hours with that person just to either pick their mind, brain, or listen to them talk, or tell them something you've been meaning to tell them, whatever it might be, who would that person be?
That's an on-the-spot question. If I just think about it for 3 seconds, I mean, right off the bat, Nikola Tesla.
It's not a bad choice.
I'd like
it's really
to talk
not.
to him, yeah.
And why? Well, I think it's probably an obvious answer, but I have to ask why as well.
Well, because when you think about what they had to work with back then and what they were figuring out and what they understood, it's almost alien to what their environment would have been like, you know. Today, we can test and figure out whatever we want to figure out, but back then, those guys didn't have anything to work with.
Yeah.
I mean, it was very, very primitive, and to be able to, when you look at the elegance of the math and the numbers behind everything that they came up with, and how beautifully simple it is, it just, I don't know how. How they had to be real genius. If you took those people like Nikola Tesla and the other greats from history and you put them in today's world, what would they come up with? You know,
we got a couple of folks that probably are living like that right now in today's world. That would,
right.
We could mention some names there. I think Tesla's probably in my, if not number one, definitely top 5 as well. I'd be so curious to pick his brain. Oh my gosh.
Right.
All right, so two truths and a lie. We'll end this off with probably a laugh. Would you like me to go first, or would you like to go first?
Well, however you want to do it.
All right, so two truths and a lie. I'll go first. I got to give you two truths and a lie. I didn't even prepare for this at all myself either. And because I do so many podcasts, I try not to repeat my lies and my truths, right? But there's just so many random things. All right, let's go with... I think I've used this one before, but it's a curious one, and it's a fun one as well. I have won a Fear Factor contest, if you remember that show. I have surfed on top of a car while going down a highway. And I have played professional soccer.
And I have to pick which one is
The lie.
I'm going to say professional soccer.
That is correct.
All right.
And I did play at a very, very, very high level, which was right next to professional soccer. But I never got to step onto the game field during a game as a professional soccer player.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, okay. So I guessed it. So now I have to do the same thing?
If you have two truths and a lie. And with your background, you could probably come up with all sorts of crazy stuff.
Okay, let's see. On the spot here. Two truths and a lie. Let's see. So one would be that, talk about being on the spot.
Yeah, it's tough, right? It's tough.
A million different things, and I got to think of one right now. Let's see. I have... I'm drawing a total blank. I have, let's say, one is I have been over 230 miles an hour in a vehicle that was on fire and that I was in control of. There's one. One would be that I have jumped out of an airplane and parachuted to the ground. And another one would be that I have played on stage to 13,000 people.
Well, knowing the conversations we've had earlier today, that third one is true. Because I asked you about what was your largest audience that you ever played to while listening to your music. And I feel like the first one was real specific, and you did mention earlier in this podcast you've been on fire before. So I'm going to go with you have not jumped out of a plane and parachuted to the ground.
You got it. Yeah. I want to do it, though. I will do it if I have the opportunity to. That's one thing I want to do.
We will close this out with one small story from me then, since you want to do it, and that is my skydiving experience.
Yeah.
And I've been twice, and I have this terrible motion sickness issue. I get sick in cars. I get sick on the ocean in boats. I get ill. So I didn't think about this the first time I went skydiving, but it's the same concept. And they tell you to look at the horizon if you get ill as you're floating. So my story goes like this, Jim. First time I went skydiving, I was stoked, excited. I've always wanted to be that guy in a squirrel suit that can fly around, right? It just sounds like so much fun. So my buddies and I were like, let's jump out of a plane. Let's head that direction. I was like, yeah, let's do it. It sounds like so much fun. So my buddy goes in front of me, and he jumps out. They tell you, all right, you go tandem if you don't know how to do it on your own. For the first time or two or three or whatever. So they tell you, okay, we're going to sit on the side of the plane, and we're going to rock in the direction of the exit. And on the number 3, we roll out. Well, firstly, that's a lie. Because a lot of people on 3 get real scared, so they go on 2. They always go on 2, just in case someone's like, no, tries to grab onto the side. So my first buddy went, my second buddy went, 1, 2, they roll out, right? They just teach you kind of lean to the right, and they guide you on how to do that. When my first buddy went, I looked at my tandem guy, and I'm kind of an adventurous, and you might get that from me already, kind of an extremist when it comes to things, and I was like, can we do something besides just roll out? I just spent like $300 to do this, I was much younger at this time. $300 was a lot of money for me. Like, I just spent $300 on this. Can we do something more fun? He's like, well, what do you mean? I was like, well, can we do like flips out of the plane or something like that? So he's like, are you sure? Like, really question. I was like, yeah, I was a lifeguard at this time. So off the diving board, I do flips all the time, right? So he's like, sure, let's do it. So we jumped out, sky, ground. But because I'm by no means a professional on day number 1, the parachute read as we were erratic, and it actually shot the parachute out, which gave us 10 extra minutes of float time to add on.
It was too soon.
Because it was too soon. Yeah. And because of that float time, I actually got sick in the air. And so the tandem guy's like, look, you're not the first person to get sick in the air, so here's what we do. We're going to pull this cord, we're going to spin one direction, you're going to turn your head the other direction, and we're going to spiral the sickness away from us. Yeah.
You're going to make a puke helix.
That's right. So I was right at he's like, just tell me when you're going to. I was mid-sentence. I was like, I'm going to. And sure enough, when I hit the ground, white as a ghost, my friends were scared. I was so pale white. So that is my first skydiving experience. I went again at a bachelor party and took about 7 Dramamine before I went.
Yeah.
Still felt a little queasy, but not like the first one. So that's my story to you for today. Jim, thank you so much for joining me,
having me
on the Gunn Show today. This is JLP Machine and Welding. Give this guy a buzz, especially if you're in the medical world. He will make the most complex, difficult, and well, we'll just stick with complex and difficult parts look easy for you and ship with precision and exactness to exactly what you want. Jim, is there a website? I don't think I've asked you that today. Where can people find you on a website?
JLPmachine.com.
JLPmachine.com for everyone watching and listening. Thank you so much for joining us on the Gunn Show this week. I hope you had fun. It's definitely so much knowledge on this one, and I hope you felt a bit of inspiration as well. I know I did, Jim. You've been an inspiration for me all day today. Almost want to move to Massachusetts so I can hang out with you more.
Yeah.
But off we go on to another city for another time. Thank you so much, Jim.
Thank you.
And everyone watching and listening, thank you for tuning in to The Gunn Show. We will see you, or you will hear us again real soon. We'll talk later.